Hi students, this is Professor Laney and I'm here with Child Development 110, Child, Family, and Society, or Child, Family, Community. And this is chapter 1. I have been teaching this class for about 10 years at this point, and I do have an undergraduate degree in sociology, so this is kind of my jam. I really have a lot of support in the class for this actual content. But this lecture, you're going to see me get kind of excited because I kind of really like this stuff. So hopefully I can keep it to an hour and you guys can pause it and come back to it and watch it as many times as you want and repeat and replay and things like that, because I do tend to talk fast. And I do have some tea here, so I'm a little chattery today. So let me share the screen. And chapter 1 is ecology of the child. So first of all, before we start, ecology, the first thing people think typically is like nature. Yes, but it's more than just rocks and trees and, going for a hike and stuff like that. It's meaning the environment in which a person, and in our case, a child, is like kind of like their bubble, their biodome, their sphere of influences, really, that are not the influences that a child gives out, not necessarily at the beginning, but the influences that are placed on the child. So to give a little bit of a setting or just a slight reference point, I do tend to use a lot of personal examples in this class, because I do believe that personal examples brings the material to life. So it's not just content, right? My job here is not just to like shove a bunch of content down your throat and then you just like regurgitate it on a test. The point of this class is to see how children, AKA you, AKA everybody, grows up with the different things that are on the outside of the child. If you took 107 from me, you're going to learn about the inside of the child, the body, the brain, the emotions. This is that plus the outside things. So again, before we get started, as a reference, I do have an adopted child and he's of mixed race. And so in our house, nature versus nurture debate is always present. So when I say nature, it's usually your DNA that we learned in 107, right? But nurture is more of the environment, right? So my son, even though he is learning Spanish, he's not bilingual. With his birth family, he may have been bilingual at this point. So what he was exposed to in my house is different than what he would have been exposed to in his birth family's house. So again, I'll give you a few examples, and then I'll give you examples from my life, because maybe some of you have the similar stories where all of you and your siblings are very similar and you went into the same field and you have very similar hobbies. And I see that in your intro discussion boards where a lot of you are very similar and cohesive and you have this very tight-knit group. But there may be some of you similar to me who have one of those upbringings that wasn't so cohesive, and all of your siblings are so different, and we all scattered to the ends of the earth doing different things because we had, even though my parents are still married, we had different experiences along the way that helped shape who we are. So again, this class explains all of that. This class explains all of that. And no matter if you are a child development major or you're even water, fireman, like anthropology, English, biotech, this class, most child development classes, have to do with people who were children, right? So if you can learn the inside factors from 107 and the outside factors from 110, you got it going on. Because even if you work in a lab, you have to work with other people. And so if you can have these, like, how did this person get this way? Or how do they develop this personality? Or what is their culture? If you have even any of these questions, it helps bridge a gap and make our differences smaller, because this polarizing is not very helpful, but getting us closer together by learning how people develop really makes it easier your whole life, no matter your career. Okay, I'm gonna get on with it. Fair? So ecology of the child, we're talking about the ecology of the child. So the child and everything that they interact with. So a lot of times children, especially during the pandemic, children didn't go outside a lot and they didn't interact with a lot of people. Okay. So their bubble was a smaller bubble and it was just their house. But is it a large house? Is it an expensive house? Is it an apartment where you're sharing it with 4 other families? Those are different types of experiences. And what goes into that bubble? Is there loving, caring, nurturing, cohesion, or is there strife and drama and trauma, things like that? And how does that affect a child's upbringing? Also, is there a high level of culture, meaning like religion or art or education? Is there a lot of influences like that on a child's upbringing or not? Or what if during the pandemic, that child was part of a family that had to move several times because of loss of work or loss of a family member, or they had to move to support other family members? What does that do to develop a child as well? So again, think of ecology as not just the outdoors, but everything a child is exposed to. And I will be asking you questions on what were you exposed to? Because again, this content, if it doesn't apply to you, it's going nowhere. It has to make sense, right? So again, every chapter in our book starts off with learning objectives, and it tells us what we'll be learning in this chapter. Hint, hint, sometimes I go back to this list and make quiz or test questions out of this. Yeah, this is the point. It kind of gives you a heads up, right? So we're going to talk about ecology and discuss how it relates to child development. Kind of did that already. Check. Define socialization. Now, this is the keyest word, the biggest word, the big word, the mascot of this class, socialization. That is it. Socialization. We're going to hammer this down every single chapter, because again, that bubble in which a child is exposed to and grows up in, that's called socialization. How is a child taught how to live, how to be an adult, how to be a kid, how to go through puberty, how to be a friend, how to be, right? That's called socialization. It has nearly nothing to do with getting along with other people. Like, I mean, going out and like partying. Socialization does not mean being social. Two different things. I'm going to tell you that right now. So, and I will ask you that question multiple times. And I'm telling you, at the end of this class, people will still get it wrong. So don't start now and realize socialization is a process, a lifelong process. Even if you're not a child, but you're new to like a country, you're childlike. So if I had to pick up and I had to move to Ecuador, I'd have to learn a few new things on how to be a proper Ecuadorian citizen, right? Or just a long-term visitor or whatnot, right? I can't do the things that I was doing before, or else I wouldn't fit in, and there might be problems, right? I'd have to know the language, have to know the money, have to know the cultural ebb and flow. Maybe that is a siesta country. I'm not certain, right? Maybe it's certain things are valued in that country, like going to church, and that's not my gig right now. So it's like, so certain things I would have to learn. I would be childlike. I'd be like a little baby in that culture. So a lot of times people come to this country and these socialization processes occur in different ways. And we'll talk about that in chapter 2. But again, socialization is the key mascot for the whole class. And we're going to talk about it every single day. Okay. Describe and illustrate how society's concept of childhood has changed. Define a theory and explain it. Describe how socialization occurs in a bioecological, again, the person as the bio in its environment. Explain how the microsystem, mesosystem, exosystem, and macrosystem interact over time, which is called the chronosystem. These are your 4 systems plus time that we are going to learn from day 1 all the way to the end of this class. It's super easy. It sounds like fancy words, but you'll get it once we get into it. Discuss the contemporary ecology, naming societal trends affecting children. Ooh, a lot of stuff affecting children right now. Lots. I mean, we have a bunch of 4-year-olds wearing masks in preschool. We had preschool shut down for a year and a half. How do we learn language if our faces are covered or we're not even around other people, right? We all kind of sort of lip read, and there's a culture and there's a nonverbal piece. And if you have little kids trying to learn language, how do they learn language like that? Ooh, a lot of things affecting kids right now. How about high schoolers? Are high schoolers kids? Yep. A lot of things affecting high schoolers. And some of you in the last couple of years were in high school. It's like, oof, I can't even imagine. A lot of things affecting kids right now. So that's a heads up on what we do all chapter. So again, my philosophy on presentations, I don't read every word. That just helps expedite time. And also you guys can always go back and read this. I put every PowerPoint up with a PDF version. So there you can read it with a screen reader as a PowerPoint or your PDF. It's up to you if you're a print out kind of person. So again, I kind of go through the slides. I don't read every single word. If you see an equal sign right here, that means like that's a course term. That's like a definition, a highlighted word in the book. And I'll try to, and I have the book here, and I'll try to get like throw out like page names as we go, page numbers as we go, just so it gives you an idea where we're at. So this one, obviously, this is the beginning of the chapter. Think about it. I want to tell you this, the very first word, the very first definition in this class is ecology. Make sure you know the difference of what it just means as an ecologist, or in terms of this class, like a bioecologist, a person ecologist, right? Interrelationships between organisms and their environment. Organisms is us. We are the organism, right? Have you ever maybe rescued an animal? What was their environment before? What is their environment now? I can tell you right now, my dog is asleep on my bed. She just showed up. She's a stray. She just showed up one day. So again, there's these different areas in which we look at this ecology, how organisms grow, right? We look at terms of their biology and their intellectual piece. That's the DNA, right? If a person has a high IQ, they're going to interact with their environment differently than a person who has a very low IQ, right? And again, IQ is not everything, but that's just one of the factors. Psychological is like your mental health, your mental wellness, how you perceive the world, how you perceive yourself in the world, how you interact with the world. So social emotional is your own self-regulation, right? How social are we, or how social we are not? Even though I'm super chatty, I am an introvert. So I do choose alone time over people. However, I'm great with people. So it's one of those pieces, like, how did that shape me as a person when I had no kids on my neighborhood, my age, and my siblings were a lot older or a lot younger? Well, I had Book of the Month Club. Did that help shape who I am today? Yeah. Yeah. And then culture are those pieces in our society that you learn over time. People are not born with culture. Culture is that you are taught culture. You are influenced to adapt to culture. So you're going to say, well, I have a friend of mine who said, I can't believe, she's in graduate school, I can't believe these people were turning in papers and they didn't even follow APA or whatever. It's like, well, you are a teacher. You come from a long line of teachers. Your culture is education. APA style is easy for you, and you have high standards, and you think education is really important. A lot of people don't agree with that. A lot of people have never been really exposed to those things. So our culture shapes how we see ourselves, how we act, how we behave, and how we see others. Yeah. And then again, this ecology, it can change over time, and we'll talk more about that. Right, because are you in the same bubble as when you were a kid? Perhaps. But now that you're an adult and you have different ways of seeing the world, you interact with that bubble differently, right? Good. So again, social ecology means like us in terms of, we are not just one organism in this environment. Our environment includes other people, right? So do we get along with them on a personal level, social level, or societal level, right? Sometimes people are really great in small groups. Sometimes people are great in larger context. But again, some people feel that they need to like be a part of government and have a hand in it and watch the news all the time and be on top of it. Some people are like, no, I'm not really good at that, and I'm going to stay away from that. So as again, we get to choose because we're different people. However, our choices are kind of based on what we're exposed to, right? Like my surrogate mom, she watches news like 24/7. I can't do it. I think it's just so stressful, and she's like a stress ball just sitting there watching it. So I'm like, but that's how it works. That's how she was exposed to. Me, no, thank you. Adaptation. I think we've all heard this before. This is how we can adapt. Again, we'll find out what it's like to adapt, or what happens if you don't adapt. And we have choice. We see it out there all the time. Some people are willing to adapt. Some people are unwilling to adapt. And again, there are upsides and downsides, or consequences and benefits to all of those things. But again, as different people exposed to different things, we make different choices. Demographics is how we study, and just it's kind of could be a little dry because it is statistical, but demographics can mean how tall people are in this country, how much money they make, what kind of housing they have, what kind of schooling they have, how long is your hair, what's your income, like, so anything that can be measured can be statistical. Now, statistics can also measure quality of life, not just numbers, right? My son, gained 50 pounds last year. So there's a number. We'll talk about this later too, about number statistics versus quality statistics. Although he gained this specific number of weight, did his quality of life change? A little bit, yeah. I mean, like he's stronger, taller, he's taller than me, things like that. But he can't run as fast and he doesn't have as much endurance. So the quality of his body may have, right? So we can still have numbers that measure quality and quantity. Economics is money and goods and services, capitalism, the whole business. You guys got that. Now, again, I mentioned this ahead of time. Socialization is a lifelong process. Now that I'm like older, I get all these like emails and postcards and all kinds of stuff from all these older programs. Like UCLA has this older adults program that I qualify for. I'm like hilarious. And so I'm learning how to be an older adult. It cracks me up because I feel like I'm 23. But again, this process by which people, it literally says acquire knowledge. So are we all smarter than when we were 2 months old? Yes, right? Skills, do we have more skills? Yes. Do we have different character traits? Yes. Some things we are born with that kind of stick, but a lot of things change based on our environment and our bubble. And again, here's the thing, you can learn all these things and be an effective participating member of society or not, right? I mean, think about it this way. Next time you drive in a car, whether you're a driver or passenger, think of this yellow line in the middle of the road, or even white lines on the other side of the road. What keeps a person from driving on the wrong side of the road? Well, we are taught not to do that. Do people do it sometimes? Are there consequences? Yes, there are. Is that an effective member of that society? No, when you're driving on the wrong side of the road, that's dangerous. Can kill someone, right? So again, effective membership can mean different things, but at the very least, laws and safety first. And then how people want to express themselves, especially in this country, there's a lot of room for interpretation on that, right? Again, in other words, children, socialization is how children become adults. And again, it could be adult people becoming adults in a new society. I have a new set of friends that I met through Peyton School, and they're from South Africa. So it's a very different culture here. But I do believe that they're both British, but they grew up in South Africa, and that's a different culture there too, going from England to South Africa, and how it is for them, and coming here and learning everything that's totally different. So it's really kind of interesting to see. Socialization, again, occurs over time through interactions with others. Again, if you were on a deserted island, could you learn new skills and learn how to adapt to that island? Sure, but it's not the same as living in a society where you're not interacting. So once you interact, you learn the larger rules of the society. Obviously through communication. Also, communication is nonverbal, so we can observe people and learn, right? If you've ever seen people walking up to a concert, you're not sure where the gate is, you just kind of follow everybody else. That's how you observe and learn. And emotionally significant context. We'll talk about this more later, but usually when you have a stranger who walks up to you on the street, well, that really doesn't happen a whole lot anymore, but if they said, you really need to join my church, or you need to go take this class, or you need to do this, you need to wear your hair differently, you need to wear a different sweatshirt. A stranger who's telling you things, it really doesn't matter, right? But if somebody important to you says those things, you're gonna, think about that. I'm gonna think about that. What if it was your best friend? What if it was your parent, your grandparent, right? And again, outcomes. Chapters, if you look at our book, chapters 11 and 12 are outcomes. So once we learn all these tips and tricks and rules and processes, there are outcomes. Are you a successful or helpful or functional member of society? You know, I mean, there's a lot of people going off grid right now. Is that still, yeah, that's still part of society. That is a choice to go off grid, but you do have to come in and sometimes power up or get water and things like that. And you still have to interact with people, but yeah, living off grid is still a choice, and that can still be considered successful in our society. We're always changing, right? Always changing. And again, there's always, in every class, there's always a backstory of where this came from, what, things like that. This was one of the first people, and we'll talk more about the other theorists here, but Mead said that language sharply separates humans from other animals. And I always get an argument here. Oh, but my dog and my cat and my whatever. Yes, animals can communicate, but they don't speak the way we speak. So we are socialized uniquely because of the verbal language that we have. Yeah. So keep that in mind. Okay. Language shapes our thoughts. Language shapes our actions. Language shapes our attitudes, our behaviors. All right. So language is huge. That's why we're constantly trying to get babies, mama, 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 da, 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 mama, 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 right? Trying to get children to talk, because that's how children learn most, right? So socialization can be back and forth. I learn a lot from my child. Yes, I can still learn. And I love learning from college students, because there's a lot of stuff out there that I don't normally see, because I'm kind of in my little ecology bubble, right? I'm on campus right now, right? A maturation, as we get older, we process things differently and we learn things differently. And sometimes we change our minds based on what we learn. Our genetics, right? Our genotype is our gene expression. We learned this from 107. And temperament is kind of like our operating system when we're born. And I mentioned extrovert and introvert. That's part of it, but just know that temperament is pretty specific and pretty, let's say it's very specific at birth. Your personality gets built on top of that. So I am an introvert, but my personality is on top of that, right? So I choose to refill my energy up alone. I choose to have meaningful, comfortable, like cozy time with the dog and a book and whatnot. But my personality built on top of that. I like people, and I want to work with people, and I want to help people understand themselves, so then society can evolve that way. So I've learned how to build a personality on top of that. I put this little grid together, which is kind of a riff on, let's see, page 11. So temperament, if you hear the word temperament and you think mad, like they have a temper, that's not the same thing. Temperament, these are the different childs. These are the different types: easy child, slow to warm, difficult child. So easy child can just go to everybody, can eat whenever, sleep whenever, just like, it's like no big deal. Oh, wait, I'll put here. Page 11. Good. And sometimes slow to warm, that child can be flexible as well, but at first they're a little standoffish. I used to hide behind my mom when their new babysitter would come, and I'd hide behind her and be like, I'm shy. So that's like, exactly, like, oh, really? You have to let me know you're shy? You just give it a minute, right? And then sometimes there are children who are fussy and they don't sleep at a rhythmic hour, and they don't go to people, and they're just, you know what I'm saying? It could be a medical issue, it could be colic, it could be anything like that. They could have sensory issues that they're responding to, their clothes or something they smell or the environment or temperature, anything like that. And just know that any one of these categories, easy, slow to warm, or difficult, does not mean that that's who you exactly are going to be as an adult. Just because you were a fussy child doesn't mean you're going to be a fussy adult. You can, again, build that personality on top of your temperament that acts as like a buffer, right? I do have a lot of sensory issues, but I've learned not to be so sensory, what's the word? Specific. I look at it this, here's my knowledge coming into place. When it's summer and it's hot, yeah, that's normal. That happens every year. It's kind of predictable. Sometimes we have little blips in our hot and cold, right? But when people go, oh my God, it's so hot outside, I'm like, yeah, it's August. August, that's how it goes. So I've learned that if I have a sensory response or I'm irritable because of something, it's not the weather, because the weather to me just is, it's going to happen. It happened before me, it's going to happen after me. It's a planetary thing, right? So, but if I'm hangry or hungry, or I have a pain, then yeah, I'm going to have a different, reaction to that. So this bottom part, I want you to realize here that how parents and children work together on this makes a huge difference. So for example, my husband's very introverted and my son is extremely extroverted. I'm somewhere in the middle. And so how a child is, let's say the child is very rhythmic, right? And you have this child who wants to be fed at the exact same time every day. They at 10 a.m. they take a nap. It doesn't matter where you are. If you have a child who's that flexible, that's going to work well with a very flexible adult. Maybe adult who's not great with schedules, but you're at a job interview, or you're grocery shopping, or you're at the park, or you're at work, and you have the child with you, and bam, 10 o'clock. Oh, it's 10 o'clock. That child's going to sleep. That might work together, but sometimes when a child has a different pattern than the parent, there's a goodness of fit that may occur or not. So for example, you have two flexible people, a flexible child and a flexible adult. Awesome. You have a rigid child and a flexible adult, not so awesome, or vice versa. A very rigid adult and a flexible child might work. Do you see how this piece of goodness of fit? So for me, I like schedules, but my child has multiple disabilities, so he's never really been a scheduled child. So I try to put schedules inside of the unscheduledness. You see what I'm saying? So this connection, this goodness of fit, I can deal with his super outgoingness when we go to this grocery store. He wants to talk to every stranger. So that works for me. My husband will not take him to the grocery store. Do you see? So the goodness of fit will actually help with the socialization process as well, and this quality of attachment. And we'll talk way more about attachment. That's huge. And again, there's intentional and unintentional socialization. You can clearly sit a child down or a person down and say, no, this is how we do things here, right? We might have an orientation. We might have like a group of friends who say, no, you have to do this and you have to do that, or else you're not in our group. We'll talk more about peer involvement later. But again, there's this intentional. We don't leave potty training up to children by themselves. We say, it's time to start potty training. And we do all the motions and the little toilet and all the rewards, all the stuff, right? Same thing with bike riding. We don't just say, hey, get on a bike, right? We have tricycles, or we have bikes with no pedals now, and they're like little walkers. So there's a bunch of different steps that it takes to get these skills built, right? Same with swimming or giving directions. We teach outward, clearly teach these. And the teaching can happen over years too, right? So potty training takes a while. But there's other socialization processes that kids pick up just by watching, you know. If you've ever seen like a toddler or a teeny tiny baby, like seriously, like pick up just let me give you like a toy that, let me do this. I have a stack of 3x5 cards. They pick up a toy and they're like, la 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 la. It sounds like a conversation, but it's not a conversation. They're learning language, but they're copying you, right? So again, there's this unintentional socialization. So if you're dropping F-bombs every time you call somebody, just, to pay your phone bill or something like that, guess what? Yeah. So again, it could be how you dress, how you talk to people, how you behave. So there's a lot of unintentional socialization. So I gave you some examples here. Some of the agents of socialization, these are the people that can help socialize, teach a child how to be an adult. Agents can be family. Obviously, we learn a lot from our family. They're our primary agent of socialization. You're born into a family, and even if you're adopted, you are taken to another family. You are in a family, right? We don't have 2-year-olds fending for themselves, right? School can be very shaping of a child. I like all these different pictures here. Even cultural activities, fast food. Do you know most fast foods their logo is red and yellow because it makes people more hungry and it's very eye-catching and things like that. We're socially very unintentionally, very subtlety. There's a lot of subtlety. Stress, military, voting, multi-generational families, taking care of the earth, technology, beauty, everything. There's so many different things that can actually socialize a child, teach a child how to be a child to eventually be an adult. And so keep this in mind. It could be, anyway, I love this picture. I know it's probably staged, but it's a bunch of different girls and they're all kind of different, ethnically and culturally, but they're all wearing the solid shirt and they're all talking on the phone and their hair's all pulled back. You guys remember that in middle school, everybody had to look the same. Yeah, same kind of situation. That's why I put that one in there. I really like that one. And again, change happens, socialization happens differently as you grow, as you go, as our society changes. We've had so many changes in the last few years. Unbelievable. I feel like we've like fast forwarded our society like a decade or two in terms of technology and how what's important, because we're seeing a lot of people shift in what is important. And we thought there'd be a lot of people going back to work, and a lot of people aren't, or they're working from home. Some certain companies will never have an office to go to anymore, like Twitter, things like that. So we've changed a lot, and there's a lot to be grateful for. But again, you've seen some people adapt, some people don't. Right. So so maybe your family's adapting, maybe your family's refusing to adapt. How does that raise a child? Okay. Also here, we talk here about, oh, this is old now, blah, 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 blah. No Child Left Behind Act is old. It's been revamped, but here's the thing. It used to be that children would go to school and be like, okay, well, we're teaching you how to be smart so you can be an adult. Now there's a lot more to it. The standards, accountability, and flexibility is still important. It's just not called No Child Left Behind. I think it's called Everyone Succeeds Act, and I'll look it up again. But this is in our book, so I put it in there. Excuse me. And then we have laws and legislations for people who need an equitable education. So come take 205 with me. We'll talk more about special education. We're seeing a lot more children qualify for special education because of the trauma of the last few years. And so this creates individualized curriculum goals, right? Maybe some kids are never, ever, ever going to be good at math, but can they still graduate high school? Sure. We can do alternative assessments. We can do different things, right? But it has to be developmentally appropriate. And even these developmental milestones, I am not kidding you, have changed recently, meaning people have been examining, are those developmental milestones what we expect children to do at a certain age? Are those the same for every child? Or are they culturally navigated towards the white Anglo-Saxon community? And the answer is yes. Different children develop at different times. And just because one is behind a little bit doesn't mean that it's bad. So there's a lot of re-examining even the last few years, just a lot of re-examining. And so I find that fascinating because life's never the same. The only thing that is the same is change. So if you say, well, this is the way we've always done it, how long is that going to apply? 100 years? 1,000 years? No, no, 5 years, 10 years. I mean, the US Mint just stamped out a new quarter with Harriet Tubman on it. So you can't say there's never been a woman on a quarter. There is now, right? So it took forever, right? It took almost like 170, 175 years, 180 years. Yeah, but things change, right? So again, I'll keep you guys updated on any of the other changes, but just know that change is normal and change can be very, very good based on your adaptation. Again, we'll talk a little bit more in depth, but I want you guys to realize that there's a law, how we treat children now, how we talk to children, how we consider children, what we even think of children, how we educate children, how we raise children, completely different. Can you imagine? So let's see, 500 years ago, let's see, just do 200 years ago. So let's say right in here, in between the 1700s and 1900s, the 1800s, Industrial Revolution, machines were being invented. Photography was being invented, right? And they were just saying, and this is just now where children were living in the dirt. Like there would be like 6, 7, 8-year-olds living like homeless, what we would consider homeless people now, living by themselves, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, if they didn't have any parents. That doesn't happen anymore. That does not happen, and not here, right? In other countries, perhaps, right? And that's when they would have children in factories doing these labors with this big machines. And guess what? Children are small and children are still learning, and sometimes children get hurt and it would die in a factory. And then you just go get another one off the street. So that's when we started putting children's rights and labor laws together. So the 5-day work week is because of children who were getting hurt and maimed and killed in work experiences. Yeah, same thing with like Labor Day and the Haymaker riots. Look those things up. Go do a deep dive on that, because those are how our treatment of children actually changed our entire society. We as adults benefit from a 5-day work week, although I work 7 days a week, even though we had to put these laws in place to support children. Do you see how helping them helps all of us? Helping one group of people oftentimes helps all of us. And so again, abuse protection, yeah. And when you take other classes with us, like 220, which is childless victim, known as trauma and resilience class, or you can come take 205, you'll learn about the laws and regulations that have come to pass over time. And even here, having equitable education for all has developed over time. And we'll even talk about families in our community. The guy who's our library is named after helped shape inclusive education policies for the entire United States. Yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. We'll talk more about that later. And again, socialization and adaptation, again, when you have infants, you are doing everything for them. They can't even wipe their own mouth, right? So they're spitting up, they're peeing, they're pooping, they can't get their own food. But as they grow more independent, right? So I have a teenager right now, so I try to do this thing where he's like, I don't need your help. And then 5 minutes later, oh, mommy, I need a hug. I need some snuggles. Like, okay, you want more mommy and less mommy. He's starting to figure that out, right? Where I make like a nice dinner. He's like, no, I just want to eat ramen. Nope. Right. You still need more mommy at this time. So there's this point where he won't, but right now it's like half and half. Oof. Right. And again, there's multiple disabilities to factor in here. So sometimes children are a lot more independent at a very young age for a number of reasons. Okay. Let's see. And then as we're getting input from our bubble, right? Instruction, like somebody says, hey, let's go learn how to ride a bike today, or fill out an application, or learn a new language, right? That helps put our outcomes of values together. So when somebody gives you a standard, this is what we expect in our culture or our house. This is the attitude, right? Maybe you have high standards, right? Learn by doing. It's like somebody says, like, I know you don't know how to make bread, but I'm going to show you. Come over here and I'll show you how to do it. And you're going to do it. Now you stir it. Now you knead the dough. Like you measure that out. Learning by doing. It's like, hey, if I really want to learn how to make, if I want the fresh bread, like I'm seeing on TikTok, then I'm going to do it. So that actually shapes your motivations, right? Feedback is, hey, you did a good job. It makes you feel better, right? Especially when it comes from a person you appreciate. Reinforcement means like, it could be rewards on the outside, could be rewards on the inside. So this morning, my son was about to say something kind of snarky and he caught himself in the middle of the sentence. And I was like, whoa, oh, and he's like, I caught myself. And so then I said, awesome. Thank you for catching yourself, because if that would have flown out of your mouth, you would have gotten you in trouble. But I appreciate that you're trying. And my standard is that you don't say those things to your mother or your parent or an adult, right? Exactly. So the self-regulation, I was like, you caught yourself. That's awesome, right? And then punishment is like, we don't do that. You get that taken away. That's bad. Whatever the punishment form looks like. And we don't advocate for physical punishment ever. But it also kind of helps cement your morals. And then group pressure. Now we have gender, but gender roles. How do your friends or your family or your church or your society says you should act in this gender category? Now, again, this is all very interpretable, but again, group pressures, right? So if you have a way of being gender wise, their society is going to tell you something different, or your friends are going to tell you something, or you might just like want to just be you, like do your thing, and that's awesome. But there's those days where you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't wear that, or maybe I should wear that, or maybe I shouldn't do this, or maybe I should do that, right? I love how society is changing and shifting and flexing. And again, some people can adapt. Some people are all about it and on board, and some people aren't. We'll talk more about that too. Can't win them all, right? Now, again, this entire book is based around one main theory. We'll talk about different theories here and there. We talked about meat. But this bioecological model, this is a huge part of this class. We will talk about this model in every single chapter from here on out. Where in 107, we talked about Piaget and Vygotsky and all these different people and, Freud and Erickson and stuff like that. Here we're talking about one, because you know what? It really is the best. It really is the best. So ecology is our bubble. The bioecological is a person in that bubble, right? The organism in that bubble. And there are corresponding theories, like Piaget does talk about as a child grows and has influences and seeing other peers and modeling and things like that, a child will create a set of cognitive, milestones or markers. I don't want to say milestones, but markers based on their environment as well. And then there's more patterns in there too. So I mentioned this earlier, qualitative versus quantitative. Qualitative means the quality of something, and quantitative means the quantity of something. If I can put a measurement to it, like again, my son gained 53 pounds. There's a measurement. That's quantitative, quantity. But if I said I was a marketing person and I watched a bunch of people watching a movie, and I counted and I saw most of them smile, most of them laughed. I didn't count them exactly, but there was a favorable response. People liked the quality. People responded favorably. There was a really big smile on somebody. That's going to be more qualitative. Did the quality of a response or the quality of that action change? Right? So let's say sometimes people go, oh, I just need to go to the beach. Right? I just need to go to the beach. I just need to chill out and decompress and go at the beach. At the beach, I could count how many times you go to the beach in a month. Right? This month you were really stressed out. You went to the beach like 17 times. But I can also measure every time you go to the beach, your stress level comes down, like you feel more relaxed and things like that. So again, make sure you know the difference between quantity and quality. Okay. Now the whole model, these are the 4 systems, and then there's like a 5th time traveler piece to it. Okay. So microsystem, I like do little hand movements. Sometimes that helps people, and it might help you too if you're a kinesthetic learner. So microsystem, I go like this, micro, like teeny tiny, right? Mesosystem, I use like the M, the ESLM. It's like kind of not super teeny tiny, but it's like in the middle, right? And then exosystem, I give an E, and I go way, way out like this, because exosystem is it's really far away from the influence of a child. And then a macro system is the biggest influential sphere. That's why I put the planet behind me, right? It's hard to think that the planet's well-being can affect a child. I mean, it can, but not directly. So we'll talk about those first more direct microsystem people. And then there's like a mesosystem where those people interact. And then there's exosystem where that doesn't necessarily affect the child directly. And then the huge macro system, the huge macro system is the system that we grow up in, right? Okay, and then the chronosystem is how that all goes through space and time. Yeah, it's really kind of fun. So this is the actual model. I took it without the color. I showed you without the color, so you can just see it as a model. I like it because to me, it's like a kaleidoscope, or like if you had a flower right here and it was like swirling. This is not static. This is not a 2-dimensional. It looks 2-dimensional, but imagine if it was 3-dimensional. When I had classes face-to-face, we would actually make this in a 3-dimensional piece of art. I might be asking you to do that later. Go around your house and make some 3-dimensional art. Yeah. It's fun. It's fun. It helps you see this thing differently. So now if you look at the colors, like I jumped ahead a little bit, there's different colors in the book. And if you notice, the colors correspond to these colors. So if I have in the middle, this is the microsystem. The microsystem, these are going to be the same people, the same influences in the microsystem in the same order, right? It's just this order in the book, but in your life, it could be different, right? So family, yeah, whether you have a relationship with them or not. School and childcare, your school could be SAC or the school you work at, right? Your community, the community around SEC is different than the community around like Norco or Saddleback. Media and peers, right? So as like a young adult, you may have your biggest influences is from your peers, or maybe you're really focused on your education, right? But now that you don't live at home, or maybe you do, like, again, these influences shift differently, right? They shift as your needs or as as your world shifts, these shifts. So that's your microsystem. I'm going to jump ahead to the exosystem. The exosystem, see how these colors match? So let's look at parents' work. What is in between parents' work and the child? The family, right? So the parents' work is part of the family, but like not directly. It is, but it's not. But if you're not sure, think of it this way. What would happen if your parents lost their job? Would that affect the family? Yeah, it would. But where your parents work doesn't necessarily affect your day-to-day. Like if you're the child, your parents' work is part of the family, but their work doesn't necessarily affect your day-to-day experience unless that job is gone. So think of it this way. These are like magnets, right? But the exosystem doesn't necessarily directly influence the child. Makes sense? Meaning like, when's the last time you went to a school board meeting? Probably, maybe never, right? Do you still go to that school? Yeah. Do you still follow their policies? Yeah. But the school board policies can affect what's over here, the schools. Make sense? Good, let's keep going. So again, into the microsystem here, this community, right? What is the external influence to a community? Community boards, right? Like there's city planners and there's city councils and there's things like that. Does it directly affect a child's everyday day-to-day? Not necessarily, no. Even if their mom was on a community board or their dad, right? It could, but not directly, but still indirectly. So then let's go back here. Microsystem is media, right? What affects the media but doesn't necessarily affect the child? Federal and state commissions like the FCC, the FTC. Who picks what goes on TV and when? We'll talk more about that. Lastly, peers, okay? This one is a little bit looser here because a lot of times social services, this means more like social activities. It doesn't mean like social work. It can mean like, is there a dance at your school, or are you allowed to be with your friends independently, or are there things that you guys can do, like just being social, right? The more time you spend with your friends, more influence they have. So going back to 20 here, this is kind of a mock-up. Although this model is a tiny bit different, I like it because it's in color. So if you have a child in the middle, you have these small influences, and now it has changed over time. This is the original model. So this one you don't have to study so much. I just wanted to show you, it's another way of looking at it. These mesosystems we'll get to next. But again, this exosystem, the school, it doesn't exactly touch the child. And this larger macro system we'll talk about last. And then this chronosystem is this going through time and space, right? Again, if you see here, there's 4 bubbles. This is the original model. There's 5 now because we've moved religion out to the cultural values, and we put in our community and media. Yeah, huge. So let's go back to this one. This is the main one. You see, here's the child. Here's your family, school, care, community, media, peers. But look at this mesosystem. Meso means medium or intermediate, like in between, meso. When you have these 2 microsystems interact, like family and peers, this mesosystem does have a direct effect on the child. I grew up in a house where I wasn't allowed to have friends over at all. Like at all. It was very, very rare. No sleepovers. I wasn't allowed to sleep over. It was very rare, right? So this right here could have been very influential. It was influential that I didn't experience those things, right? So again, now also when your family and childcare school interacts, like I have to sign up for teacher conferences this week. It's for next week, I guess. But yeah, I'm getting emails and texts from the school like every day. Does this directly affect my child? Yes. He tell me all the stuff he's doing. It's fantastic. And then when schools and community work together, like we've had guest speakers this month, and we kind of do it every month, but I mean, that's just one of the ways that schools and communities work together. Sometimes there's events. We'll have science night in the spring. Sometimes there's choir. Sometimes we're supporting like incoming freshmen or seniors in high school, or we do dual enrollment, or we support, maybe there's like a parade and, our school's supporting that. So a lot of times these 2, I like, this is my little fingers for mesosystem, because look, they're like little petals, right? Where they crisscross, right? And so here for community, and when media gets together, there's some people who say this show is bad, or we shouldn't have that, or there's too much social media, or we should, no phones in school, or yes, phones in school, right? Censorship or mediation between these things to happen here, right? Last one is peers and media. Peers and media. Need I say more? My God. We're now talking with our friends more electronically than we are ever doing them face to face now. So yeah, media is huge, or your friends, again, social media. I'm old, so I have a different opinion on social media. I do like it. I think it's functional. I have all of it. I just don't participate with a lot of it because, I'm busy and I'm a mom, but I do like chilling out sometimes. And my son shows me all the stuff I think is important to know. I mean, there's so much out there right now. So, but me and my friends, yeah, we still text and we do a lot of stuff together, but it's not at the same level as people half our age. So again, here's the system in color. Microsystem. This is the mainstay. Everything starts here, right? Think of it as like circles that get bigger, like the universe, right? Here's our mesosystem. Here's our exosystems. And yes, I made all these graphics. And the macro systems. Now here's the last one. Macro systems, macro means huge, the biggest. Now, these aren't really bubbles. If you look here, they're not really bubbles. They're just here. They're kind of floating in around. Have you ever seen like a snow globe and you shake it up and how the snow is all around it? That's like the macro system. The macro system is stuff that's moving all around you. We live in a society that has kind of a leaning towards a certain type of culture. Our society, sadly to say, is all about money and looks and capitalism and all that stuff. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be a part of that, but that's the bigger picture here. You can buy into it or not, right? I mean, there's some things that we fall in line with, some things that we don't. We'll talk more about that as we go, as how people choose. Religion, again, we technically are a Christian-based, country, but we have multi religions here. And because we are founded on like, have your church, right? Have your religion, do your thing. That doesn't mean you have to follow the biggest one, right? Other countries, you get one choice. Yeah, other countries, you get one choice. Not that choice, or zero choices. You get one choice, right? Interesting, right? How about science and technology? Our philosophy in our country is that science and technology is important. Yeah. We need to have the fastest car and the best phone, and we need to be in space. I mean, obviously, we had private people put spaceships together this year. Like, come on. Our society is highly based on science and technology. Other societies, not so much, right? So this is our society. And I can only speak for the United States. I mean, but this theory can work in any other country. It just, the results are different. Well, the results are kind of the same. You have a person who functions in that country, but you can have a different ethnicity, a different religion, a different philosophy on science and technology, right? What about politics? Weird, right? We have a two-party system, although we say any politics is fine. I mean, right? We've seen how that's gone lately. But guess what? In other countries, sometimes you get one choice. You don't have to, right? And sometimes in other countries, it's not as important, right? Even in a small village in a remote part of like the Amazon rainforest, there's politics, right? Just on a smaller scale, right? If I trade my best goat to this guy and, X, Y, and Z, maybe I'll be in his favor and I'll get the first choice of the whatever, right? Politics happen. It's just in which scale and how functional those things are, or how good or not so good those things are, right? Economics, again, are study of consumption, distribution, wealth, money, and goods and services. In our country, economics is big. Making money, having money to spend. Yeah. In other cultures, not so much. It's about sharing, things like that. So the macro system is like the bigger picture, the bigger picture of our country. And all these things help shape a child. Because if you weren't sure, ask yourself, what was life like here 100 years ago? Santa Ana College has been there for over 100 years. And when were cars invented? About 100 years ago, plus or minus 5, plus or minus 10. You think everybody had a car? Everyone was driving to school 100 years ago? There were no buses. There were no Ubers. You were walking, you were taking a horse, you were taking a carriage. Yeah, 100 years ago. So the fact that technology has given us vehicles the way we have, right? Our technology to have extended school or distance education, right? So again, in the culture, what is your culture? Does your culture support education? Our dominant culture does. More education is better. Right? Whether or not you believe that, that was what our dominant culture says. So I just put those here as macro systems so you could see them just more clearly. But again, these are swirlies. Because right, when there's political unrest, that might be a bigger bubble. I'm nervous about, driving downtown. There's a protest, right? Or science and tech, like I've had students saying I'm having trouble with my Wi-Fi. Yeah, it's a big deal. That's a big bubble for you right now if you're having trouble with your Wi-Fi. And religion, maybe you are the person who goes to Bible study 5 nights a week. Awesome. That's a big bubble for you. That's awesome. Your culture, ethnicity, like this is my people, this is my tribe, that might be the biggest bubble for you. Economics, going to work, getting money, saving money, or spending money, paying rent, that might be the biggest bubble for you. But our society has all these pieces. And whether or not, and again, we can only talk for the United States, but that's right. That's in a nutshell. So let's go back here. This whole, if you can, print this out, memorize it, post it up, do something like that. If you were in class, we'd pull it out and we'd do coloring. No joke. I want you guys to get very familiar with this, get very comfortable with it. And Bronfenbrenner, that's the name, Bronfenbrenner. Bronfenbrenner. Okay, when we talk about it, I want you guys to say Bronfenbrenner. A lot of people are like, Bruderhosen. No. If you created a theory, you would want somebody to get your name right? Yeah. So I want to make sure that you guys are very comfortable with that. And again, rewatch this 100 times if you need to. We did talk about ethnicity and culture. Ethnicity, this means this is the identification where people identify themselves, right? Ethnicity, right? This is the thing that you're typically born with, but people ascribe it to themselves, right? Culture is the part that that's learned, right? So I have family members who've never been to college and have never set foot on a college campus and never will, right? So that's a different culture to me where I live and breathe education. Not only am I doing this and I have my specialization in special needs, I go home, I have special needs at home. And then when I'm here, I'm getting calls from the special needs school. And then when I'm at home, I'm doing work at home. It is my culture, right? So ethnicity and culture, they do kind of overlap here too, right? And so again, this ethnicity is usually what's ascribed, meaning it's kind of on you. This one is learned. So we'll talk more about that, and we'll do different examples so people understand that one. Components of culture. Every culture has symbols, right? I mean, we have a symbol here, a peace sign, but I'm going to give you a hint. The biggest symbols we all share, English language. Now, if you're new to the English language, this might be new to you and you're still learning. That's great. But again, the symbols that we share in which to communicate and learn more is this shared language. I can somewhat read and write in other languages. I'm still learning. But I do this in our dominantly shared language, right? Cultural relativism. Sometimes you'll hear people say, well, yeah, of course, education is important. But for them, that means they passed high school or they passed the 8th grade, right? And then sometimes people are like, no, education is super important. I need my PhD. So cultural relativism. So some people say, oh, that's a very quiet culture, or that's a very dominant culture. It's all based on our own experiences. So let's explore more before we make those comparisons, right? We've talked here about the US culture and the blame game. This happens on a large scale and a small scale. People always blame, well, they do this and we do. It's not about assigning blame, really. I mean, yes, sometimes we have to figure out who's responsible for certain things, but the blame game doesn't make us better, it doesn't move us forward, it doesn't, things like that. So we could, again, talk more about that. But the culture of college students, holy cow, or just the culture of education, how we, I mean, maybe your family's super supportive of education, or maybe your family's like, ugh, another semester, how long are you going to be at SEC? Or some families are like, oh, you think you're so big and you're going to go to college, you're going to be the first one that's going to go to college, oh, you're so big. You might get backlash too, right? Or when you say, I really have to study for a final, and then your family says, no, we really need you to help do this. You're like, but now I was studying for a final. So sometimes college students kind of go in between several bubbles, and there's a really weird adaptation when you have one set of rules at home, one set of rules at school, and then you have your own personal rule. It's like, there's a lot. So I do that. I really enjoy working with college students, working with you guys. No matter what your age is, I think it's really great that people just want to do more and be better. That's why I'm all about it. I'm like in it to win it, so you guys can get the most. Now there's two ways of looking at societies. If you're in anthropology, this is kind of similar to that. We talked about low context and high context, and it's a funky concept. I want you guys to understand this. Low doesn't mean low class, right? And high doesn't mean high class. Low context means, oh, let's see. Let's start this way. High context, I want you guys to visualize like an Asian ashram up in the mountains with the clouds, like a Buddhist ashram. High context, collectivistically oriented, meaning we are one people, we are one village, we are one family, or we are one culture, and we treasure everybody's contribution and we support everybody equally. Yeah, so high context, think of it as maybe more of evolved, maybe more spiritually. I don't know how to make it make sense to you, but I think of high context as people who kind of see past the lower context, whereas our, like the United States is typically low context, individualistic oriented. Yeah, but the interesting thing is that we have subcultures inside of our dominant cultures, and a lot of our subcultures are high context inside of the low context. And so that could have a huge influence on you growing up as a child, or children who are growing up right now. Yeah, it's a huge, my parents, so I'm only second generation. My grandparents were all not born here. So my parents were the generation that was taught not to do what the old country did, right? And we all see this. The first generation comes here, they have children, and they'd say like, let's erase all of that stuff, and because you're an American. And it might not happen so much now, but my parents, you know, are boomers or older. And so there's this piece where like, don't speak German, don't speak Hungarian, and don't speak Latin, right? And so when the generation after that comes, we're like, hey, what's our heritage? How come you're not, you know, what language did you speak? And oh, grandma and grandpa, that's you're not your name, you changed it to sound more American. Like, so there's these pieces of cultures that sit inside of our culture that, right? So, I mean, in my culture, when you were 8, you could have wine. European countries are pretty liberal with wine and children. The American culture is not that way. So there's certain times where that was a conflict, you know, that, well, when I grew up, that was normal, but we don't live there anymore. We live here now. And so there's this piece where I definitely sense a struggle with everybody trying to figure out what the big culture expects and what the subculture allows. Yeah. Have you ever been somewhere where you see a child working and you're like, I don't know if that child should be working? Like a 10-year-old kid, like working, and you're like, why am I seeing this child working? You know, and it might be at a family owned establishment where that is normal. That is typical for that individualistic, or excuse me, that collectivistic, that very group oriented. That's how we do. All kids work. You know, in the dominant culture, the individualistic dominant culture is like, oh, we can't do that. So to me, I run that conflict in my head when I see children. You know, is it right for the child? Perhaps in that culture. Is it right for our society and children? Not necessarily. But I'm not the culture police. I'm not gonna full on pull a, you know, internet worthy video and something like that. I just try to, you know, say hi and see how it's going, see if they're doing okay. Yeah, move on. And then worldviews. Whew, you guys can read more through this on the difference between low context and high context. It's perfectly clear. And if you can keep those two distinct in your head, then you got it, right? You know, just because I don't want to say anything that's confusing, but to me, that high context is that very inclusive and warm and like kind and collectivistic and thoughtful. And also you'll see here that those high context societies are more at one with nature, right? There's a river that flows and we allow it to flow. The low context societies are like, okay, we're going to put a dam and we're going to put a bridge and we're going to, right? And so we think that we have power over nature. So it's hilarious. Again, think of what culture invented airplanes, right? Low context, because we need to be able to, you know, manage air, right? And we powered through until now we have people in the air, right? Some other cultures are like, nope, I don't have wings. I'm not made to fly. Oh, interesting. So again, this kind of contrasts the low and high context societies. Now, each family could be its own society, right? Like a sub-society, like a dominant culture, a subculture, and then like your family's culture, right? How do you determine who's in charge? How do you communicate? How do you get along with nature? How do you adapt? How is technology good? Is technology bad? Right? And so think of all these things. I'm planting the scene as how do these things affect you as you're growing up? Ooh, yeah, right? And again, the patterns of behavior are sort of determined on that macro system. Again, you'll see some of the individualistic ones tend to be the more white Anglo-Saxon, right? But also city dwellers and middle class, right? Their collectivistic tends to be people who, you know, you hear about farming communities, right? Or people who are less educated, but they tend to help each other out more, right? More helpful. And this last piece is about the chrono system. Wow. So if we went all the way back to our model here, and if you could see this model moving over the course of time, so then the arrows are here on this one, this bubble, this kaleidoscope over your head or around you like a snow globe going through your life, right? Chrono system. We all get chronologically older no matter what. How is the chrono system changed? There are certain factors like, again, phones. I tell people, my mother-in-law, you know, she's in her 70s. She was one of the first people on her street back in Wisconsin to get a television. So they were like, "Ooh, you guys are rich." First people on their streets to have a television, right? And so now she's got an iPhone 12. Can you see that change of technology? Holy cow. The fact that she's in her 70s and still kicking it. I know a lot of 70 somethings are just like, nope, I ain't doing it. I don't want the technology. I don't want to deal with it. Excuse me. And so there's a piece there where it's like, has that technology to her time? Did she adapt to it? Yeah, it's fantastic. How about an old technology that came and went, right? I mean, the old devices that were just so ridiculous, and now we're so advanced, it's unbelievable. But think about what about gender patterns? What about religion? What about politics? How have those changed over time? Technology, schools, how have school, oh my gosh, everything has changed so rapidly in the last couple of years. I feel like we were doing this pace and then we went, oh, we like fast forwarded. Because I'm telling you, a lot of my friends who are teachers are like, I hate this. I hate teaching online. I'm terrible with the computers. Guess what? Adapt or quit. And some did. Some adapted beautifully and some quit. That's how life goes, right? Everybody has their differences. Everybody has their different choices. And again, society on its own has it's a clear definition. It's a shared territory, culture, social structure. But every society is a little bit different. And I try to put, here's our ashram up in the sky, right? What about this? This looks very collectivistic, people trying to help each other out because it looks like a building that's barely even built, or they're building to it, right? Or the homeless people a lot of times help each other out. Or there's these big mega mansions and where nobody knows their neighbors, Yeah, you've seen those. And I like these very Nordic villages and things like that. How it's like so different. I really love seeing how other people live. And if you don't travel a whole lot, I mean, we're just traveling a whole lot lately, but if you don't travel a lot, once you do, you start to see the differences, and it's a beautiful thing. Okay. And then I'm not going to go through all the history, but you're welcome to do it because it really kind of gives you the foundation of how we got to how we are right now. And it's technology and machines and thinking and growing and inventing and things like that. And we talked a little bit earlier about industrial societies. And once machines came in and technology came in, things changed for everybody, right? Again, adapt or not. And then post-industrial society, we are starting to manufacture ideas, right? Content creators, they're not manufacturing anything, they're just content creators. And so now that we're coming into this, or how about Bitcoin, right? We're not even trading things that are real anymore. We're speculating on things that are not even real. We're not even saying like the price of orange juice, right? Or the price of wheat. We're saying, oh, the price that we're speculating on that Bitcoin will go up or down. Right. So now that we're manufacturing ideas, how do we evolve again as a society or culture? And again, if you think about like the earth and then America, then North America, United States, California, Orange County, Santa, like I live in Santa, Orange, right? This class and you, like there are certain things that exist in your little bubble that don't exist anywhere else. It's like the TikTok videos, things in my house that just make sense, right? And make sense to you, but it might not make sense to everybody else. When people ask me what my culture and ethnicity is, I tell people I'm distinctly Southern Californian. I talk that way, I look that way. I mean, I've seen most of the states in the United States, but I haven't traveled really abroad too much. And I was born in Fullerton and I live in Orange County. So you don't get a whole lot of that anymore at this age, I guess. But I say, yeah, California is a great place, but Southern California is totally different. Oh, and then Orange County, clearly different than San Diego, clearly different than the IE, clearly different than Los Angeles. And I'm saying go 30 miles in any direction, different culture, same state, right? So again, think about what is specific to you and how you learned it. We'll keep going. Here we go. So now here, contemporary ecology is a nice way of saying what are the newer things that we're looking at in the newer bubbles. Quite frankly, there needs to be a new bullet here that says pandemic. Really, because that's what we're looking at. Biotechnology, oof, that's huge. We talked about that a little bit in 107. How we doing genetic manipulation has helped with our vaccinations. Shifting responsibilities. There's plenty of stay-at-home dads now, or there's same-sex couples, or now I'm seeing people who couple, but not couple. They're like best friends, but they're like life partners, and they're like, you know, not romantically involved. But I'm seeing evolution of this. I'm seeing thruples, multis, like all kinds of stuff. We're seeing this evolution, and it's really interesting. But how does that shape the child in that bubble? Maybe great, maybe not. Information technology, again, we're isolationism. Yeah, it's hard. Well, I think we all have like the fatigue of not being around people, and people are getting out more, and then there's more new cases, and it's like, oh, it's hard. And how about globalism versus nationalism? That was huge in the last 2 years. America, make America great again. Like, really? Like, and now Canada's feeling it right now, and there's a lot of protests and the mandates there's still a lot going on, right? And then shift in decision making. People doing their own research now and not following the blanket statements that they're getting out on social media or from leaders and things like that. And I really like how people are more of the informed consumer, but sometimes it does get a little shady, because I tell people, if you ever walk into your doctor's office with like a printout from WebMD, don't do that, because they went to med school. I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm not a huge fan of, doctors are not perfect, but have you ever walked into a restaurant with a recipe and said, make this? This is what I think I have. This is what I think I'm going to have. Like, don't do that. Don't do that. Do your research, but also listen to the expert and factor that in, and then make your choice. Right. And then again, we have these national, local, and statewide and national data collection and observations on the change on children, how this is helping or hurting, right? How has families, the change in families and change in socioeconomic status and money and income and inflation and things like that, how does that affect a child as they're born? Economic circumstance and indicators. Again, it's been rough. A lot of people lost their job. And then a lot of people are getting new jobs or getting retrained or not going back to work, or they're creating self-sustaining environments or doing a home-based business. Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff going down right now. Healthcare indicators, again, are we vaccinating small children? It's up to the parents. It's pretty wild, right? Physical environment and safety indicators. Now, if children are at home more, are they getting sick more? Are they getting sick less? Did you guys notice that? Like the flu has like been like very, very low, like the last few years. People still get it, but since we're not around, but does that mean that we're getting it and keeping it in the house, right? Behavior indicators, are we seeing more kids that would be labeled with ADHD and autism? Yeah. Could it be because they were cooped up because of the pandemic and their brains didn't grow like they would typically grow? Yes. Could it be stress and trauma that makes a child look like they have autism and ADHD? Yes. So we have to see what these indicators do or what they really mean, right? Then education indicators. I had a friend of mine, she's a third grade teacher, and her district told her, assume that every single child that you get in your class is delayed now. So by the third grade, everybody's delayed because of the pandemic. Does it have to be true? Is it really true? Or is that looking down at children, or is that really giving them more grace to not be perfect at this age, which I think it's important not to be too stressy on kids, because come on, life is a mess. Why are we expecting children to be perfect? Like if a 6-year-old or 7-year-old's only been on the planet for 6 or 7 years, how do they have it figured out? I don't have it figured out. I know plenty of adults who don't have it figured out, right? And then health indicators too. Are we seeing more kids on tablets, less physical activity, like obesity and things like that, and diabetes is coming up? Yeah. And so again, when we look at socialization patterns, we look at agents of socialization, we look at societal changes, chronological changes, school changes, friend changes, technology changes. Yeah, all these things create outcomes or effects on children. And again, these outcomes, I'm giving you a heads up, there's a quick little exercise you can do just for you. On page 394, 95, it kind of tells you what your values are. I do have a friend who's an expert in value assessment. And so if you guys are interested, just let me know. I can always have her come in and do a guest speaker event, which is really cool. But again, the outcome, how we think and feel, our emotions and our thinking comes from how we were raised. True or true? True, right? And how we behave in society, or how we behave in general, comes from how we were raised, right? You guys all seen the YouTube videos about the people freaking out for whatever reason, at Starbucks or Walmart or whatever. Do you think they just pulled that out of the blue, or were they sort of indirectly taught that, or maybe even directly taught that? Right? We've all seen the people who are like unbalanced, unregulated. It comes from somewhere. You don't just pick that up out of the blue, right? So again, there's this last piece tells you there's some cool TED Talks to watch if you're interested. Please do just for yourself. By the way, you can watch a TED Talk and give me a 2-page paper and it's extra credits. I did put that in the supportive module. It shows you how to do that. I take up to 25 points, so you can do five of those. It's up to you. And I also give extra credit for certain events and things like that. So just watch your announcements, and then it'll give you all the information that you need to know. So that is chapter 1 in a nutshell. It's a lot, but every class should have a foundation piece. The first 2 chapters in this class are foundation pieces. And heads up, chapter 2 is about not where socialization certainly occurs, but the exact technical socialization techniques that your big brother might do for you, your coach might use, or your grandma might use, or media might use. There's certain little techniques and tips and tricks that they do that society does that we are exposed to all the time. So yeah, chapter 2 is all about the agents of socialization and the methods of socialization. I really, really love it. All right, so I think this is it for now. If you have any questions at any time, always reach out to me. In class, the Canvas inbox is the best way to get a hold of me. I look several times a day, and I'm trying to be as responsive within a day or two, just so I can answer your questions as quickly as possible. Okay, class, again, I look forward to seeing you, talking with you. Let me know what else you need. I'm here. Talk to you soon.